Okay, well, really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to talk through something we're super excited about. We love that we have the opportunity to work directly with businesses to provide services to their employees. It's something that we're doing more and more of. And one of the things that's really exciting about it is just that it really redefines what people think of as an EAP. We think of an EAP as really something that is a management tool. And it's something that people use on an active basis, and it's something that you build into your approach to how do you manage people. And so I think as we roll through this, you'll see that it will start to grow from in your perception as something that maybe you're not used to from an EAP perspective, as a helpful tool to get past issues with employees. So the things I want to just touch base on and try to keep as tight as I can on this in terms of timing. I know we want to try to stick to around 45 minutes or so. The main number one thing I want to just point to why this is important, what's at stake. I want to give you an overview of the EAP and how to actually use it as a management tool, and then help go through some situations and some stories and things to help understand the best way to perceive it and how to refer it, and to how to actually put it into use as a management tool. And then, of course, at the end, any particular situations that you guys want to talk a little bit about or chew on, we're glad to do that. So why this is important. The most critical thing that people need to understand that when people have emotional suffering, it just degrades every aspect of life, personal, professional, and corporate prosperity. So meaning that your employees, as they are degraded and they are suffering emotionally, so will your company suffer. It will increase medical costs. It will increase absenteeism, presenteeism, which is basically walking wounded people who show up for work anyway. And it will absolutely affect bottom line profitability and just the efficiency of the organization to function. So it is very much important to deal with emotional issues in the mental health world. But the problem is that mental health does not have a good history for being very effective. So we have mental health benefits and we have EAP, traditional EAP benefits, but there really is not much that can be said to effectiveness. There's a lot of reasons why it's not working. And one of the key issues is that mental health approaches really focus on drug therapy and talk therapy, and it's very symptom focused. So it's looking at the end of really, how do I control the symptom? And the difference is that you can either do anger management or you can deal with anger. And that one statement is really the huge distinction between our approach and the rest of the traditional mental health approach, is that it's all about trying to deal with the anger that wells up, and whether they talk you out of it or they give you some pill, the reality of it is that you're really a whole lot better off. You can figure out how to simply address the anger and have it go away, then you've really got something. From our perspective, that you have to go to a level beyond where mental health will go. You have to deal with foundational beliefs and root causes of things. You have to dig into what are the things that actually motivate people at their most core part of who they are in their existence, and what is important to them on the deepest level. And as you resolve those things, then the outward behavior becomes very different. And that's the best way to get it resolved and have the resolve be enduring. So our approach, which we developed here, is proprietary, is called motive transition therapy. And the concept is simply that, to try to move from people being motivated and driven by their suffering to being motivated and driven out of a sense of assurance and peace about life, a level of confidence about the things that are most important about self-worth and about whatever is important to them relative to what makes them feel like life is something they can have confidence in and they're assured about their role in life. So it's a very different approach. One of the things that we do here through the EAP is that we resolve two key problems, which is also hampering, even when there are times when mental health has some effectiveness, that's hampering the access. And you still have the issue of the stigma of diagnosis. No matter what, nobody wants to go get a mental health diagnosis on their record. And of course, it's required in the mental health world for treatment, and it's required for reimbursement in insurance companies. So there's just really no way to get around it. That's not how we function. On our end, we're not trained traditional mental health people at all. When someone comes in, they go through a 37-point assessment to determine what it is that's bothering them. And at the end of their time here, then they go through that same assessment and they tell us how much we've impacted how they're feeling. but we don't ever tell them they have something. They tell us what they have, and then we see that as a good measuring point, and then we go upstream to the root causes and try to resolve it from that place, that perspective. And then, of course, the other aspect, as I said before, is that mental health really isn't that effective. And one of the interesting ways you can tell that is that many of the drugs that people are using have been identified really years ago in research are not being effective, like depression drugs. Not really sure why they're still being prescribed. And then the central, most common correlation of effectiveness in counseling has to do with how well you have a relationship with your counselor. So obviously that means they're not using evidence-based therapies that have been proven in clinical settings. It's more about having to have a good relationship and try to manage that relationship into something that helps the client. Usually that doesn't last beyond the engagement with the counselor. And it's not evidence-based either. Also different from us, we have a lot of data to prove what we do. So motor transition therapy is our concept. The foundational approach is that spiritual well-being is critical to mental health. And just for those who would like to wondering, well, okay, that sounds great, but are these people any good at this? Here is the data from a database of 250 people. The red is obviously how they felt when they came in, and the green is how they felt on the way out. And we also did a follow-up study on this, and on the average of 320 days after leaving our help, and we didn't touch them at any point after they left, they reported something in the order of 99 or 98% of the healing they had received, they were still experiencing 320 days later. So this is very sticky. It's much more permanent. It's not like if you stop talking, you don't feel better. You stop taking the drugs, you don't feel better. This is a deal where you're fixed to a great degree and you're on a track of ongoing healing in your life and given a set of tools to deal with life in a very different way. So these are, depression and anxiety are really two of the huge, most common central issues within mental health. And obviously stress is important to medical health as well. And that relates to some of the other things here that follow. And then the bottom one, hopelessness, is pretty much connected to depression. So these are the emotional things. And then interestingly, we also tracked some physical aspects of how this is affecting people from a physical perspective. And we tracked these particular characteristics or feelings or how they're doing. And sleepless nights is obviously a huge one. We are just amazingly effective with people who have a hard time sleeping at night. And then we see all these other correlations between physical things, even things like neck and back pain, which, by the way, is in the neck and back pain is in the top 5 medical issues that cost employers the most amount of money and the most amount of productivity. And there's another huge impact there as well. So this has all been proven. The orientation between emotional health and physical health has been proven outside of us clearly, but here's another evidence that it is correlated, and it's pretty important. And this is why it all works. This is the foundational issue of really the centerpiece of where all our focus is. And it really just has to do with the fact that someone's well-being is really at its highest level when they are able to trust their God, whether that be little g or big G, for a sense of assurance about life. And so, it's really built into everyone. I mean, most people have something that they look to. If you just kind of say, my luck, whether it's my lucky quarter or my lucky tie or my lucky suit, or I feel better when my team wins, or I feel better when I have 100,000 grand in the bank. I feel better when something outside of me is in place and I can trust that thing. So it's a foundational human nature that we need to trust in something that's bigger than our problems so that we can have peace about our problems, or is bigger than our uncertainty about getting the things that we need, because it's bigger than our uncertainty. So it's a human thing, so you have to address it. And so that's across the board, but obviously we're faith-based from a perspective of biblical truth. So it's the Judeo-Christian heritage, or the people who really connect with what we do. We occasionally have some people who show up who don't know how committed they are to their faith, but obviously people who are staunch atheists are not going to be interested in our process. And our process is an option. We never put it out there or even suggest that it be a sole option for any company, because we don't want to have start creating religious bias issues. And as I often tell people when they ask me, what about the religious bias issue? I say, well, if a Muslim shows up and he's got numbers that are as good as mine are, you need to sign him up for your Muslims, because they want to go to him, her, or whatever. So our perspective is that it is an option, and it's a really effective one, and it's perfectly rational, reasonable, and defensible to make it available to an employee base. Now, I have a whole lot more to say about those issues and the condition of mental health and why it is that spirituality is the missing piece to that. And we don't have time to go through all that. As a matter of fact, I spent a lot of time in the think tank presentation addressing a lot of that specifically with a lot of research. And it's a very researched out white paper here that I put together. If anybody wants a copy of that, just let me know. I'd be happy to send you a copy to validate the whole progression of all of those statements, which I said about the mental health condition and why it is so important that we have an effective mental health solution, because the condition of people we care about is important, and the condition that they're in affects the condition of our company. So that came around to the employee assistance program that we are talking about today. I just want to give you a high-level look at what is in that program. This is the graphic from one of the pages in the brochure that we built just for you guys. And the first thing to know is that it's 6 hours of counseling at no cost to the associate. So they can basically make contact with us. We set them up with someone. We collect data for how they're feeling now, and then we begin the process. And if there is, if it's indicated that after the 6 hours that really there's something pretty deep here and we need to put them through our regular transition, our regular process of motive transition therapy, then we'll roll them into the 30-hour counseling program. After 6 hours are paid. As a matter of fact, it may be even after the first meeting, it may be indicated that this is not going to be a 6 hour intervention. We really need to look at, so we see a lot of things that really are a whole lot deeper than this, and it's going to take our program to accomplish what it is that these people, what it is a person might want to accomplish. So that's a 32-hour program. It's got because of y'all's generosity, the copay on the part of the associate is either going to be $15 an hour if they do it in 2-hour sessions, which is what we always recommend, or it's $20 per hour if they want to stretch it out and just do an hour a week or something like that, and also based on time availability. So you have level 1, you've got the 6 hours, which is going to be free. The level 2 is going to be rolling into the full counseling program with a modest copay. And then the third level is an intensive program, which is 40 hours, and it's 2 or 3 times a week. And this is going to be for people who are really are having a really hard time kind of holding together. They may have come out of some intensive therapy, like in a psych hospital, which is commonly where folks come to us from that go into the intensive program. But you might have a scenario where I noticed in some of the feedback I got from you guys that you do bump into drug issues, and you might have someone who is really not able to stay away from that issue and needs some help getting some healing so they can resolve that, so they can be a productive, consistent employee. And that would be what the intensive outpatient is about. And that is not built into the program from a cost perspective. If something like this does arise, then we will inform the person who contacts us that that's funded on a case-by-case basis. And then we would contact, and we would get permission to talk to you about it. And then we would contact you guys and say, this is the situation. We think this would be helpful. Do you want to participate in them going through the program from a cost perspective? So that's something that follows. So these are the 3 levels. Any questions about that? Or anything else related to this point, as Beth was reminding me. Okay, keep going?
Yeah, keep going.
Okay. So trying to make it easy to make connection. So this is the Quick Connect card that we've printed out. They're part of every one of the employees that's in the package for every employee, which gives you just this is sort of in the mentality now when you open up some sort of technology like a video player or something, nobody sends you the big book anymore, right? They just give you, some real simple how to get started. Well, this is sort of a how to get started really quickly kind of mentality. It's very simple. All you have to do is call us at this number. Janet or someone who backs Janet up will answer the phone, or they can email us. And we've set up a unique, as you can see here, we've set up a unique email address just for you guys. So if they email, they can just say, I'd like to talk to somebody and get some help. That is all they got to put on there. And they will be contacted. They will respond by email first, and then we'll ask for permission to contact them by phone, and just can go into the conversation from that point. Also, anybody can hit the website. There's 150 testimonies, tons of results, a lot of other stuff. We have a lot of results about marriages and parenting and other kinds of things that we also address. They can get that. They can read a lot of detail about our approach. If they wanted to, they could just click that button right there and have and schedule a session. If they do click that button, then it goes into our online scheduler, and then they'll be contacted from that perspective. So we've got a lot of easy ways to get on and just begin to ask questions. Calling us up and asking questions does not mean anybody's committing to do anything. It basically is just a call up and get information about. They can tell us, Janet, when they call, or whoever's supporting her, what's going on, and then talk through whether it's appropriate for them to give it a try or not. So that's how you get to us. Any questions about that? Okay. So now let's move into a new way of thinking about EAPs as a management tool. And this is not a dormant employee benefit, which is what most EAPs are. They're built very differently. They're accomplishing something different. They're there kind of as a backstop. They're almost like best practices in HR to have an EAP, so people feel like they need to have it. There's not a lot really done with it in terms of reporting on its effectiveness or what are the outcomes of the utilizations are. Sometimes can be hard to get. But this is your perspective of what an EAP has been in the past. Just kind of shelve that if you would, and we'll move into what we're trying to do. We're actually trying to have a targeted impact. We're talking about a targeted impact on the well-being of the employees and on the productivity and the profitability and the efficiency of operation of a company. That's what we're looking for. And as we talk about results, and we bring results in the names are redacted, there's no revelation of anybody who that's going through the program will be given to anyone there at the company. But we can combine data, redact information about that identifies what the data is, and we'll be able to show actual people who come through the program, their before and their after, either as an individual or as a group, to show, to prove our worth as we're going forward through this. But also in conversation with John, it's been what metrics can we look at now about where it is, and what are the metrics we can look at that if we had greater productivity and greater engagement and commitment on the part of employees, that there will be a number within the performance metrics that would indicate that. So it's going to be going both ways, we'll show you what we're doing, and then we're going to be watching how it actually impacts the efficiency of the business. That's very different from an ERP. So the kind of things that we, EAP, traditional EAP. So the things that we are trying to, we want to focus on and where we're going to have impact is when you have sort of chronic marginal dysfunction. Someone who shows up, does an okay job, not particularly great, but there's just things going on in the background. They're sort of like Jello. You can't really manage them into the level of productivity that they'd want to have and you want to have. And this is the person that, if you're thinking about, if I had enough, do I want to terminate them? We want to target these people to go to have the opportunity to get behind what is up with the core drivers within them that make it hard for them to engage at a level that they can perform. And of course, everybody wants to perform well and do well and be successful. And why would you consider terminating them? If there's a reason to terminate someone, that's a good indication that there's something to talk about. And then you got scenarios where people overreact, or there's change and it triggers a bunch of difficulty and dysfunction and consternation between employees, or two employees are always sparking on each other. That's something we want to target. We want to deal with, and the hearts behind the individuals behind what's going on there. Obviously, that dysfunction needs to be dealt with. And then the other one we want to focus on are people who are have high utilization of your mental health benefit, whether they're getting drug therapy, talk therapy, or they're getting intensive outpatient or inpatient. Those people are using your mental health benefit. And obviously, if we can reduce the utilization level there, then there would be an opportunity to negotiate the mental health benefit aspect of your coverage. But the other aspect of it is if they're in the middle, if people are currently in the middle of drug therapy or talk therapy, what we know is it may be affecting symptoms to some degree, but the core issues are not being dealt with. So you have an evergreen person here on the dole who's going to be locked into this, constantly using the mental health benefit. And because it's not working, they still have the condition, which makes it hard for them to be the employee that you both want them to be. So these are the three areas where we're going to target anything that's not working. But if we can impact these three areas, then we'll have significant impact on how the business is going. Okay. So a whole lot of the process now, this is kind of what the role of the manager is going to be here. And the role of the manager in getting utilization up and getting these people to get help is going to be obviously very significant. And so we have two approaches to trying to move utilization to get people to get help when they need it. It's going to be what the managers can do in situations that pop up in front of them, or if they're ongoing chronic things that they know about currently, how can they intercede and do sort of intervention in those situations with a solution that's going to actually solve the core problem. And then the other side of it is going to be direct communication. So we have info packets we've done a couple already, email drips. We've got, I think I sent you a display package, which you can put in a public place, and we can generate more of those, John, if you have other places where you want to put them. And then obviously just messaging, just specifically targeted things around specific kinds of struggles that come up either in the work or the home that would affect the business. So these are the two things that are going to drive utilization. And we're responsible for the second one, with sort of general communication and information, which we'll run through John or whoever you all designate. And then the manager-directed referrals is obviously a place where we're really just talking about using an EAP as a management tool. So just on I'll just talk about the communication piece for a minute. This is the package. This is the first and last page of the 4-page brochure that's in that package. And this gives them information to kind of grow a sense of confidence in who we are, talk about how strong our results are, some contact points there, opportunity to contact us, when to contact us. It's on that page. Internally, again, you'll see the logo that we have brought some labeling in here. But this is a confidence builder, get to know Rock House. Here are some of our reviews. We have 40-something reviews, like 46 reviews now at this point. Every one of the reviews is a 5-star review. And if you have an opportunity to read through these kinds of testimonies that people put on there of their own volition, we do not pay them to do this. They're just excited and they want somebody to know. As a matter of fact, a lot of times we have people who leave here wanting to get a workbook, which we have a workbook and a set of videos that goes with our process, and go out and put some friend through it or send some friend over. As a matter of fact, we even have developed a ministry sort of discipleship package where we have come up with a really inexpensive package of videos and workbook together so that people can take a friend through it if they feel like they want to love somebody through the workbook. So that's another aspect of what commonly happens here. And the way we express it is that people usually, when they leave here, they want more for themselves because they're on a track of getting even more and more peace in life, and they want it for other people. And that motivation is usually drives a lot of interesting activity. Like at Brentwood Baptist, we have a bunch of small groups going over there, teaching going on. Multiple churches have small groups that are built around our workbook. These are all instigated by graduates, as we call them, grads, people who have come through the program and finished up. So that's the big brochure inside, and then you got the Connect card. And I've got extra cards there. We'll talk about it in a minute, but the reason I've got extra cards in y'all's package is because this is something you can hand to someone. If you're in a scenario where you feel like it's time to talk about the EAP with a client, or excuse me, with a associate who's having a hard time, this is something, they may lose their information or whatever, but if you've got one of these, you can take this to the meeting, and if they're open to the conversation, you can just remind them. It's just as easy as calling this number or emailing this address, and you can have a conversation about whether or not Rock House could be helpful to you. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but that's why there are extra ones in your package. So now we want to kind of dig into some understanding about what you're seeing and why, and it's so important because our phrase empathy brings insight. If we can begin to understand that what we're seeing is for what it really is, instead of this is just a bad person, this is just a worthless employee, this is just someone who's got a character flaw. If we can begin to understand that all of these behaviors come out of that person's life story, they come out of the things that have caused them to make decisions which have brought them to the place that that's kind of who they are in life and how they do life. And the more that we can understand that, then the better we'll be able to, when we see something come up, we don't react to what's on the surface, but we react to an understanding of what's underneath. And then when I'm functioning by what's underneath, then now I have I'm informed in a way that allows me an opportunity to make a difference in the core problem. You know, like for instance, if someone is having a lot of depression and can't accomplish goals, obviously we'd want to put them in a contract and get them to, you know, promise me you're really going to do this stuff, and if you don't do it, we're going to have to separate. Wouldn't it be great if you could go, oh, this person is depressed. I see what's going on. They feel hopeless. They don't understand which way is up in life. This is not about, they're not going to ever get any, no matter how many constraints or controls I put on them, they're not ever going to get any better until they solve this foundational, emotionally driven problem. And as we understand that, then we can say, okay, we want to recommend you getting some help. We think that's the real problem. Let's work on that issue first. And then if that doesn't resolve it, then we'll bring in whatever skills you need or whatever management controls you need on you to be successful. So it's a different way. Instead of going, I'm just looking at results, based on results, you're out of here. Well, you know what? It's just too hard to find employees. And if we put too much investment in them to have that kind of, you know, to kind of think of it that cavalierly. We've got a lot invested, there's a lot of money. If we can have the empathy to understand there's something behind it and get that resolved, then we hang on to our investment. We have blessed somebody who's important to us, and the productivity of the company improves. So one of the very simple little graphs we have here to try to help people begin to get a sense of reinterpreting what they're seeing. And that is that if this is an example of someone, say someone has done something that's offensive, and this would be sort of a normal response to that offense. Like somebody cuts you off in traffic and you're kind of going, oh, that was irritating. Wish that wouldn't do that again. And say, oh, all right, well, I'm moving on. You know, it's like, wasn't fun, but it's not wrecking my day. However, and we call that the balanced response, just the balance between what the offense is and how someone responds to it. And you understand what I'm saying by that, I'm sure. But the real issue is this: when that's the response, when you've got that kind of a response, when you got something that's just crazy, doesn't make any sense, it's because something's going on inside. There is something in that person that is causing that response. And for instance, you might come to someone and give them some productive criticism, some helpful criticism, or some correction, or something that's actually going to improve their situation. You're not thinking it's personal. You just think it's about process. You're just trying to help them out. But then they explode, or they come apart, or they get depressed, or they got to leave the building, or they got to go get a smoke, or they feel like they need to go home, or they feel hopeless. You know, all those kinds of reactions. That's because something's going on inside. And criticism is a really big one. A lot of times the people who can't take criticism because they're wrestling with self-worth. That's an emotional issue. That's a spiritual issue. It's very, very common for people who have all kinds of different sort of out of balance reactions to be dealing with a couple of issues. And one of the common one is that I have it's sort of like my bank account is so overdrawn. I feel so lowly about myself that when somebody comes and criticizes me, I don't have anything to pull from. I don't have a foundation. I can't be resilient within criticism. The people who take criticism the best are the people who have great sense of self-worth. They're the ones that have resilience. They can take they can take direction without it being personal and actually having it be productive. So that's just kind of an example. Another great example is you start changing things on people. People start freaking out. You know, all we're doing is adding a little bit of an extra email process onto this marketing thing, but they're so locked into performance and getting it right, and they want to perform well. Maybe they're a perfectionist, and they've gotten very used to the current process and how it's working. If you come in and change their system, then you're messing with something that has to do with how they feel about life. This isn't just about the job anymore. Again, that's a big response to an adjustment in process, for example, or some other change in the company. So again, as we begin to see these things and begin to sense and look for the out of balance responses and have the empathy for, that's not because they're a bad person. That's because something inside of them makes change really hard just for them. And there's an answer for that. And that's obviously to send them, to try to get them help through the EAP. So I took y'all's input and I added to it some of the things that we see commonly. And so this is a list of the kinds of things that you're seeing and that we're seeing in other places. And every one of these things has to do with, there's something going on inside. A real common one, as a matter of fact, I had super low self-worth and I was just a miserable human being until I began to heal through this process. And that's how this process came to be, which is that I first got a big amount of healing and then tried to figure out what happened. And then I tried to replicate it. And then I codified it and created a process. And we help people with what I learned about how I was helped through a faith-based approach. And this was the one that was, this was one of the big ones for me. Job reviews were never good enough. You know, have you ever had an employee like that? You give them a 99.9 and they're looking for the 0.01. Wait a minute, what happened to the 0.01? Why wasn't I perfect, right? That's a self-worth issue. That's a foundational mental health, spiritual health concern. And I'm sure you guys have seen that. So that's an example of one. People who are really worried about what other people say about them, so they've got their self-worth wrapped up in other people's opinions of them and their performance. We talked about can't take criticism, and of course that's also the defensiveness and that taking it personal thing that comes when you're just trying to help someone do a better job, and actually they act like they want to perform well, so here's some stuff that helps them perform well, but all of a sudden I got this big reaction. Resistant to change, we talked about that one already. Just when the next bullet point is just when the level of emotion just doesn't fit with the circumstances. Can't get to work on time. There are people who are chronic procrastinators. And you know what's interesting, a lot of times procrastination comes because of a fear of making a mistake, the fear that I can't do it right. I had a perfectionist client who was a CEO of a big company, and there was an aspect of his job that he always put off and put off and put off to the very end. And what we discovered is that he had such a heavy perfectionist message, he didn't like doing things he wasn't really good at. And so those things always got put last, and then it became a problem. So again, it's another where you kind of go, well, this guy's just lazy, or he's disconnected, or he's not committed. You know, what's this person's problem? Well, there's probably an issue back there. They probably want to do better. They would like to be able to get to work on time. They would like to have your approval. They would like to be considered a dependable employee. But they've got something underneath that just doesn't permit that to happen. Sometimes they overreact and have self-defeating, you know, they'll do something that'll create a problem for themselves and how they over-respond to things. Getting involved with workplace conflict. It's another one. Emotion from, they might bring emotion from personal life. I think someone mentioned in one of their feedback forms that there are a lot of folks who bring emotional issues into the personal life. Well, we deal with marriage, we deal with parenting. That is, and then of course, and then the foundational things behind the marriage and parenting, which are creating the problem. That's another aspect of how we help out, is dealing with the stuff at home. So you may be drawn into some of that conversation, which I would recommend you not allow yourself to be. You say, you know what, I can't really help you with your conflict between you and your son, who is, you know, doing goth stuff and wearing earrings or whatever it is that your conflict is about. But let me recommend that you talk to these guys. They have a whole parenting program to help you understand what's behind that and help you get peaceful in the middle of that parenting challenge. So that would be an example. Finishing tasks is kind of saying, and obviously when you run into substance abuse, you're into substance abuse, period. No conversation. That's not something you're ever going to manage out of. And just remember that no matter what someone who is in substance abuse says to you, they will never stop doing it without help, without intervention. They just will not. There are rare cases where people just decide, but usually that's because pain has become so great in the consequences of what they're doing that they are able to override that desire for substance abuse for the desire for success or acceptance. We've had people overcome their substance abuse addiction just because they saw something that they really wanted, but they couldn't have it if they were still dealing with drugs. And that was the overriding force, which allowed them to get free. Really rare, doesn't happen often that way. Usually substance abuse is about medicating the way life feels. They're just hurting. They can't really stop it. they know intellectually they should stop it, but there are things driving them that are taking over, and they literally cannot do it. And you can tell them all day long to stop it, and they'll never be able to do it. You can explain to them what's at risk and how they're going to lose their job, their family, their car, their home. If someone is really dedicated to substance abuse for dealing with how life feels, they will just go right down and get into a very bad situation because they can't separate themselves from that. And then the obvious emotional issues, which are clear that you guys will see: crazy anxiety about little things, saying they're constantly worried, can't really get motivated, obviously look down. So these people in the anxiety, depression, anger, fear crowd, they're kind of the presenteeism issue. They're on the job, but they're not functioning really well. And one of the things that we have seen is that the degree at which someone has a level of peace is the degree to which they function in their skill set and how effective they're going to be. So when you're seeing these kinds of things, or actually anything on this page, you're seeing things that are distracting people from their ability to be as good as they could be on the job, because a certain amount of their bandwidth is invested in dealing with all this other stuff, and they're just not as present as they could be if they were more peaceful.
When I look at that list, I'll just add a thought that my mind can track that whole list, and how we have testimonies from clients on everything on there, from mild, moderate, or severe versions of those things, and just the joy of seeing them in their lives without that, and how tremendous that is. But then I also have this track in my mind and thinking back in a couple of decades of managing people before we had this process, and things like that emotion from personal life. When I look at that, I think of an employee who was a tremendous salesperson, but lived her life on a roller coaster because of her husband's substance abuse problem. And ultimately, she quit her job for reasons related to her husband's problem. And I just, you know, John was talking earlier about having empathy. I mean, I had empathy for her, but I had no clue how to help her. And so, and actually that's not an uncommon thing for clients here, to be struggling because of a serious problem of a family member, a child, or a spouse, or whatever. They may be a very capable, functional employee, but clearly the outside circumstances of their life are dragging them down. Well, that's a reason to suggest that they at least give us a call, because of course that's affecting their lives, their emotions, and their performance as well. And it's really outside what any manager is going to be able to manage them through.
Yeah, that's good. So the next piece here is understanding what you're feeling. That's a really important aspect of how you're able to manage folks. It has to do with, as a manager, how you're reacting to what you're seeing. And there's some concepts which I want to introduce you to that I think are really helpful to begin to think differently about what you're seeing, and therefore allow you to react differently, and therefore have the empathy and the insight that you would be really important to how these situations feel to you. The first one is how someone behaves is about the condition of their heart, and how their behavior makes you feel is about the condition of your heart. And that's a really important thing. If I find that someone else's behavior has really stirred me up, and I am finding myself losing sleep at night, or obsessing on it, or can't kind of get it out, or I feel very offended, or those kinds of reactions, just remember that that's a reason to call the EAP also, is that, wait a minute, why am I overreacting to the way this person is behaving? And it may be a particular, you might call it a pet peeve or whatever it is. But remember that your highest state as a manager is also going to be the degree to which you can stay at a place of peace. And if you find that people are triggering you, then that's another example of a heart issue. Something is going on. There's something a part of the life story, which makes it, when that person does that thing, it reminds me of how my dad used to do that to my brother, or whatever that deal is. It's really, really freeing to find that thing and unlock it and resolve it and move on and take away. Because what happens is that when the way you feel is affected by other people's behavior, well, you just gave control of how you feel to everybody outside of you. And you can't control any of them. So what we want to do is build ourselves up to a place, heal ourselves to a place to where no matter what happens outside of me, I'm able to have peace, think clearly, make the right decision, no matter what the circumstances of life are. And of course, the great scripture is where it talks about having supernatural peace that defies any rational understanding. Well, that's where we want to go. And we've had clients tell us that, wait a minute, I had exactly the same event. This is after getting some healing. I went through exactly the same situation with the same person at almost the same time of the day, but I completely reacted. I was totally at peace. I was just able to, I see it, I get it, and I move on instead of having it, wreck me. Another big one is having to terminate people. A lot of managers really struggle. That's the night they never get any sleep, is the night before they terminate someone. There's something going on inside. That's the answer to that. And if those things are robbing you of your peace as a manager, then that's another place where you can come in not only wanting to get understanding about the situation with the associate you're dealing with, but also resolve why it is that associate his behavior can do that to you, and basically giving him and other people control over how you feel about things. And here's another thing that's really important to understand when you're seeing behavior is, like we say here, is that the head knows what to do, but the heart decides what's about to happen. So it's very similar to a time where someone who knows in their head that at 400 pounds, when they go over to Arby's, they're not supposed to be getting the apple pie, and they end up getting 2. Well, they know very clearly that that is not what is appropriate. That's not what's rational. That's not the thing one would do in this circumstance under these conditions. They would not have 2 pie. They would not have any pie, but they end up having dessert anyway. You see where I'm going? There's a place, there's a differentiator between the motivations that actually drive behavior and emotion and how we feel versus what we intellectually know should be how we're reacting and how we should feel. And so I just want to make sure that when you're looking at situations and you feel very frustrated because you want to say, why can't they just stop it? Because they know they should do better. The reality of it is that they know they should stop it too. And just reminding them they should stop it, or making them feel bad because they can't stop it, or trying to do an intervention around controlling behavior has absolutely no outcome except for create more heat. There's not going to be any revelation or resolution in that. So just remember that when people are doing things that don't make sense, it's because of a condition of the heart which is driving them. And that's why we call what we do motive transition therapy, because we're dealing with that inner motive that really is the predictor of what's about to happen in that person's life. Make sense?
Yeah, I think I heard the last half of that. We had a breakup in the sound. So someone goes in and gets to have the pie, and then they have shame, and they beat themselves up because of the shame, and then they feel worse, and they need more pie to medicate the way the shame feels.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a great example.
You got it.
That is the cycle.
And of course, if we just look at it, we go, wait a minute. They knew better. They felt bad about it. They felt shame about the pie, but they went back and had more. What is going on with this person? Well, obviously, that's not a rational response to the situation. Really important to recognize is that a lot of the behavior that may come looking at you calling your name in the process, and it's really uncomfortable. Just remember that even though it may feel like it's about you, it's probably not anything about you. And other than the one phrase we talk about is that, we can be a blasting cap and hit somebody else's powder keg, right? We can be the cause of something that can fire something off in someone else. But the level at which they fire off, like the red bar on the graph, that level of firing off has nothing to do with you. It has to, or the situation, or anything about what you've contributed to the interaction. It totally has to do with how that situation feels to them. And that's an important thing to recognize, so that we look at and analyze and review our own way of managing appropriately, and to understand that we're not responsible for we're responsible for what we do, but we're not responsible for how people react beyond what is a reasonable response to what we do. And then the last one we talked about already is just that these are heart issues, and it's helpful and enlightening and freeing to see them as heart issues and not as character. Like, they're not bad people. That's not what's going on here. They've got something going on inside which is driving a behavior which is a problem. So I'm going to move on into the referral approach if y'all are ready.
Yeah.
So The idea here is to use the EAP as a management tool, insert it into an issue. When you've got a performance issue and you think they are trained and they're skilled, but they just can't get it done, or there is some other situation where you're struggling with someone and it's not rational, that's because it's probably heart-based. And use the EAP as a situation. Say, well, I see that you don't have. I see your problem. I see that part of this is that we haven't trained you enough, possibly on this issue. So we're going to retrain you here. But this piece over here, that's about you. That's inside of you. I can't do anything about how you're reacting to this or your fears around these things. I can provide good direction and I can provide good training, but I can't deal with your emotion. So let me just tell you, for this thing to really work for you, it's time to get some help. And if you're interested, and so this is kind of what the phrase is, I see that you're having a hard time with this, whatever this is. I think you should consider getting some help through an EAP. Would you prefer a traditional or faith-based one? Because obviously we don't want to push faith-based. We just want to push EAP, right? And if they come back to you and their response is, yeah, I'd like to do faith-based approach, then you've got the connect card. So if you've got a review with someone and you know you're going to offer the EAP as a solution, grab one of those connect cards, take it into the review with you, and play that card in the middle of the conversation and say, this is all you need. Just call these guys up, get some conversation. I'm never going to hear about it, but I would expect that if you engage them and get help, it's going to make a big difference in the outcome here. You know, that kind of an approach. And you know, another interesting thing we see in EAPs, and we haven't done a lot, but we're just beginning in this, is that it's not uncommon for, even though the EAP is offered, that the person doesn't feel the permission to actually take the time to do it, because a lot of times this is going to be something they're going to have to do on work hours. Now, one of the great things about our remote experience and doing remotes all over the country, which we have, and we're in 20 plus states and six countries, is that all they need to do is find a quiet room and contact us to set it up, and also to have their sessions. They can have a session in their car. We have people doing sessions in parking lots, in quiet cars, in basements, you know, wherever they can just get some seclusion. And one of the great things about that is that the traditional, I call an EAP, they set me up with a counselor, then I have to drive to go to wherever the counselor is, and then I have to drive back and work all that time in. This is a very efficient EAP from the perspective of it shouldn't take any more time than it takes to go in and have the session out of their day. And I think it's a really important aspect of whether or not they're going to take that move and get that help will be if you somehow communicate that they have the permission to take the time it takes to get the help here. So that's another important aspect.
Yeah, I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing you, but I think you asked me about timing, and so they can either do it for an hour or 2 hours. The intro session is 2 hours. So that's the very first conversation we have, and then we'd like to try to do that in one session if at all possible. And then after that, it is manageable in terms of hours, an hour a week, 2 hours a week, an hour every other week, whatever it is. We just try to figure out how to work it within their schedule and make it so where it doesn't take over their day. So, so moving on, urgency. You know, when should you do this? When should you do an intervention, so to speak, which is a pretty lightweight intervention when you consider what you're just making a recommendation. But the first day, we've all had that moment in our management lives where there's a first day we consider terminating that person. And you know, there are a lot of people that say the first day you consider terminating the person is the day you should have done it. And they'll look 6 months later, they'll look back on all of the trouble they've had for 6 months, and they go, should have fired them on the day we terminated them, or thought about terminating them. Well, let me give you a reframe on that. Is the first day you consider terminating someone, that's the day to consider an EAP. There's something, you know, if there's something going on, if you can identify any of the issue behind why it is you're thinking about terminating them, that is a what's motivating and driving them thing, or you can identify some of the things we've talked about, then the first day you're thinking about terminating someone is a good day to send them to get help. So just a little bit of a sense of it. When do you change a flat tire? Obviously, there's not going to be any change in that employee unless something is done. There's no advantage in keeping a flat tire. They're always underperforming. They can't go as fast. They can't perform as well. There's just no advantage in delaying. So when you think about this, when you're considering, when you see it, don't delay. There is absolutely no advantage in delaying. So the next question is, who's on your list?
You could add even, the tire doesn't have to be completely flat. If there's a leak, you might as well go ahead and get going.
Right. It's
Seriously.
suboptimal at the moment of the leak, right?
Right.
So next question for you guys is, y'all are all thinking about somebody or two somebodies, right? Right now, has fit some of these explanations of suffering, which is what it is. So write them down. Think about how and when you're going to talk to them and intervene and bring it and start getting some change right away. The ERP doesn't get any better with age. It's sitting there ready right now to make a difference. And then the big one is back to your implication, John. Are you on your list? Does some of this stuff stir you up as a manager? Would you like to get free of how management feels sometimes? Would you like to deal with some of the stress issues, some of the relationship issues, some of the communications? Are there some people that, everybody in the room is fine, but there's this one guy that makes you crazy and makes going to work miserable? Is there the one guy that you can't ever tuck in, who's always trying to lead your team to accomplish something, and it just makes that team a miserable experience? Are you on the list? So I want you to really think about, and there's two reasons why you call. One is discover what it is about that person, what is it that it's about the way your heart is set up that allows that person the opportunity to control the way you feel. And then the other question is, could I get some insight in a conversation with someone at Rock House about what's going on inside of that employee so I can understand them better? And can you help me identify or diagnose that there is an emotional issue behind this behavior? And a Rock House Center counselor can do that as well. So you can get insight in terms of what you're dealing with, as well as you can get insight to how this thing is making you feel and get whatever resolution you can about that. So I just wanted to think about your list. Who's on your list that are employees, and then are you on your list, or is there something, maybe it's not, or maybe it's just a particular thing that's that you would like to address that we might be able to help you get some direction on, or possibly do some really helpful work that helps not only at work, but also in family and every other context in life. Okay. John, got any questions? Yeah, well, uptake is an interesting word. It's if you're looking at a pure EAP, they talk about something like 10 to 12% utilization by 10 to 12% of employees will use it in a year. That's a common thing. And then usually it's more like 10 in the beginning and it goes to 12 in the beginning and it goes to 10. In this situation, the uptake I believe would be greater than that, but then it will trail off because we're getting people better. Remember, our changes are sticky. And so what you'll get is a lot of utilization up in the beginning, and then you'll get an ongoing trickle of new things that come along. And but if the stats are that 20% of the people out there have a diagnosable mental health disorder. So if we're doing a good job, then we're probably getting 20% of, y'all are helping us get at 20% of your employees who have, from the secular therapies world, a diagnosable issue. So from my perspective, you'd want to be looking at, can you get something in that range of your employees getting impacted? And even if you never get to the other 80%, that 20% is having the biggest negative impact on what's going on in the business. So it would behoove you to find those people and get them going as quickly as possible, and then utilize as you do. So that's probably the best predictor I could give you.
I would add one thing to that, which is there is that whole, that 20%, whatever that percentage is. In your question, you're asking, I think it was framed in a well-functioning organization, what would be the percentage? There is another aspect of a type of employee, and probably more so in the manager group, that are well-functioning people, but there's a significant percentage of our clientele that is the most functional person in the family or in the workplace. And they're dissatisfied with how they're reacting to what's going on, or are trying to deal with the depressed teenager or depressed spouse or the raging spouse or whatever. But they're the one who's actually in the best shape, and they're taking the lead on getting things resolved. And so there is also that kind of utilization that would not normally be expected to be in an EAP, that we would hope would be part of what the response would be to the Rock House version of an EAP.